Is the Victoria, BC real estate market shifting? I would say that it is, and as a good follow-up to my last market update, this isn't like your standard market update that you hear other realtors recapping the stats from last month and going through, there were this many sales and this many new listings. I'm going to take a bit of a step back and talk about the picture moving forward and how I think that's going to affect things in Victoria as far as what's happening on the ground over the next few months. So looking back at March, we saw an explosion of the 5-year government bond, which obviously led fixed rates back to closer to where they were pre-pandemic. And if you go to any of the 5 big banks in Canada right now, their posted 5-year fixed are about 4%. Consider that at the bottom of the pandemic, you could pick up a 5-year fixed mortgage for something like 1.5 or 1.6%. So more than 2.5 points from the bottom of the pandemic. Obviously, that's a significant change in monthly affordability for people. And what I'm seeing currently is that buyers that have pre-existing pre-approvals and are locked in at better rates than what exists in our current environment are actually forward setting some of their purchase decisions. So people that have to close by the end of May or the middle of June, they're looking at getting property right now. But overall, I'm seeing a bit less as far as sales activity, and that's obviously happening in tandem with a bit of a lift in inventory. So looking back, I looked at the first 2 weeks of March versus the first 2 weeks of April. Those first 2 weeks of March, we had 420 sales, and the average sale price above the list price was 7% above. First 2 weeks of April, we had 372 sales, and the average sale price above the list price was 4% above. We've got a bit more inventory now, close to 1,200 listings, where at the end of March we had just over 1,046 to be exact. And I expect that now that we're in the spring market and people are feeling some urgency to try and capitalize on good market conditions, we'll see it continue to trend, especially after we get through Easter weekend here. Now, how do I see things unfolding? The Bank of Canada on April 13th made a more hawkish move to their overnight rate, jumping by 50 basis points. Somewhat expected, especially given the fact that the Fed in the US is providing some guidance saying they're going to be a lot more aggressive in tackling inflation. Now, bear in mind, inflation in the US is posted north of 8%. In Canada, it's 5.7. So I would say, we're running pretty similar numbers. It's just that our data is slightly different from one country to the next. All the same, the Bank of Canada will follow what the Fed does, and the Fed is looking very, very hawkish on tackling inflation, which obviously means we will see more and more and more rate hikes, which is similar guidance to what Tiff put forward at his last policy announcement. How do I see this mapping out as we move toward the summer? I would say that once some of these pre-approvals elapse, we will see things settle a bit as far as demand settling. And I expect that that means prices will flatline in Victoria. Bear in mind that prices here in Victoria versus other major markets like the Vancouvers and Torontos of the world are a little bit more insulated because we just don't have a ton of property available, and there are constantly people that are coming here and making purchase decisions. That doesn't change that over the last 2 years, people's incomes haven't grown in a similar path to where prices have appreciated in Victoria. So my personal opinion is that as soon as we get through maybe mid-spring, we will see a lot of flattening. I'm already seeing cases where people are expecting multiple offers on properties, and that's just not happening. I had buyers this week basically go in at asking at a property, expecting maybe 2 or 3 other people would show up, and they were the only offer on the table. So more and more of that is happening, and we're not in as many of these scenarios where people are jumping way ahead of the list price in order to secure properties out of some sentiment of there being a fear of missing out, whatever you want to call it. Sentiment definitely does drive markets, and the more of these stories talk about rising rates and Canadian housing affordability, I think the more buyers start to question, hey, maybe we should just sort of sit tight for a bit and wait this out and see how it plays out. And, that's a conversation I'm having with a lot of people. Ultimately, housing is, it's an essential investment for a lot of people, just versus the other side of it, which is, renting. And even in a city like Victoria, sometimes even purchasing makes a bit more sense than renting. So considering all that, I would say if you're thinking about making a purchase or selling decision, moving forward. Feel free to connect with me, whether it's by email or phone. I'll have all that information down below. In line with my prediction for the year, I think we've seen basically all of the growth for 2022 at the front end of the year. And as these rates have crept up and we'll see some of these pre-approvals lapse, I expect that the buyer pool will be a lot more limited, especially for some of these insane prices that we've seen early in the year where people are going 250, 300, 400 over ask to secure property. So sentiment is shifting, the market is shifting. Make sure you guys get some good advice this year. Ultimately, I do think that we're still on a growth pattern overall, especially considering what the central bank may do, which is, try not to rock the boat too much and dive us into a recession. We may even see rates start to move the other way into 2023. So really tough to say. None of us have a crystal ball, but right now, if you're a seller, you should probably think about using a little bit of haste to get your property up for sale, because market conditions now are likely as good as they're going to be for the remainder of the year. With all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Once again, my contact info is down below if you have questions. I'll be sure to be a bit more routine about these market updates, and hopefully you like some of those statistics versus just the blanket sales data that some other folks put out. So stay tuned for more updates from me, and I'll look forward to connecting with you again in the future. Till next time.